Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We are really excited to be back with you all today and sharing, like Samantha said, part 2 of the Nonviolent Communication webinar. I know Samantha already mentioned this, but Miracle and I both used to work for Department of Children and Families, and we actually were just chatting about what year we actually first met. I used to coordinate the Florida Youth Leadership Academy program with DCF, and Miracle was a part of the class of 2018. And so we've known each other for over 5 years now, and it's just been really fun and exciting to watch her grow and become the woman that she is today. So we're excited to be here and present this webinar today.
So our learning objectives today, our first one will be, I can explain the connection between trauma, adverse childhood experiences, also known as ACEs, the brain, and nonviolent communication. The second one, I understand and can explain observation versus evaluations, feelings versus thought feelings, needs versus strategies, requests, connecting and action requests versus demands. And our third objective, I understand when and how to use nonviolent communication expression, also OFNR.
And we'll talk here in a minute about what we mean by OFNR. So when we think about and talk about the value added of NVC, also known as compassionate communication, trauma, and the brain, really what happens is all of you, this is probably a review, so I'm not going to go into too much detail around ACEs, fight, flight, freeze, the amygdala, the brain, right? Because hopefully we all are well versed in that content. But essentially when a threat perception happens, our lid flips, right? Dan Siegel talks about this concept of flipping our lid, and our higher level thinking of our brain goes offline, that prefrontal cortex. And what takes over is the amygdala part of our brain. And what happens is that's what's responsible for our fight, flight, freeze response. And so what Dr. Marshall Rosenberg says, who's the founder, was the founder and creator of NVC, Nonviolent Communication, he says when emotions are high, intelligence is low, meaning we aren't resourced, we aren't equipped in the moment often to handle the situation. Our intelligence, our higher level thinking of our brain is offline. And so what happens with NVC and with that fight, flight, freeze response is that when a person responds to another person in a way where we remove judgment from our language, where we make sure all people are seen, heard, and valued, right? These are tangible outcomes of using this communication process. New neural pathways can form. And so this is really exciting because old research used to think and believe that, and people used to believe that if someone experiences trauma, which is at least 2/3 of our country, right, according to that ACE study, if someone has experienced trauma, they're going to be like that. They're going to be screwed essentially for the rest of their life, right? And so with new neuro research, it proves that new neural pathways in the brain can form. And so what brain researchers have shown when using NVC, when using that language and that communication process, the brain waves start to slow down, right? And we're actually taming our brain, taming that amygdala, and physically able to pull the brain back online when we use NVC. So essentially, this process it provides concrete tools to ensure that there's connection. And what we mean by connection is energy that exists among people, right? This is replicable. It exists among people when they experience being seen, heard, and valued. And when people can give and receive, meaning there's judgment removed from language. They can give and receive without judgment, communicate without judgment. And it's a concrete, tangible thing that can be replicated. And we'll talk a little bit more here in part 2 about how that's done. So when we think about using expression through the NVC lens, Miracle mentioned this acronym OFNR: observations, feelings, needs, and requests. In part 1 webinar, I'll do a quick review here in a minute. We talked about using empathy, right? So how we respond to someone when they're going through something tough, when they're going through a challenge, have a concern, are in conflict with you maybe, and we give them empathy. We respond in this very specific way, and I'll talk, like I said, in a couple slides, and I'll do a review there. But today's webinar is going to be focused on expression. When we want to share a message to someone else that is frustrating for us, on our minds, bothering us, or maybe it's a positive thing, right? We're going to use OFNR, but we're also only going to use it if we want connection with the other person. If we truly want to like express something to them and have some sort of resolution and have this idea of removing judgment from our language, that's when we'll use this process. And again, I mentioned this in the last webinar, but the tone of voice and nonverbal communication is also really critical when we are expressing a message, right? Because if our arms are crossed and we're all like this trying to come off, and our tone is in a way that may be received in an uncomfortable way for the other person, it's probably not going to lead to resolution and connection as well as it could if we try to maintain a pretty steady, calm tone, and our nonverbal communication, our body language is received in that flowing way, if that makes sense. And so we'll break down each of these in today's webinar: the observations, the feelings, the needs, and the requests. So this is a handout as well in today's webinar. On the left side here, this is clearly expressing, this is using the expression piece, expressing how I am without blaming or criticizing. And this is what we're going to focus on today. On the right side is empathetically receiving how another person is without hearing blame or criticism. That's what we focused on the last webinar. So when we're clearly expressing, we use, again, OFNR, observations, feelings, needs, requests. And so observations, it sounds something like what I observe, what I see, what I hear. It's free from my judgments and my evaluations. So then we flow into the feelings, which are, using the feelings in the needs sheet. It's a little blurry here, but it's a handout as well. I carry this everywhere, right? So feelings is free from those thought feelings, those judgments. We'll talk about that here in a minute again as a review. And then what you're needing, because I value, because I want, because I need blank. And then the requests. There's 2 types of requests, and we'll talk about those as well. I wanted to give 2 examples of what this actually sounds like, so you can kind of get your wheels starting to turn about, okay, this is how it kind of flows and sounds in real life. So this is a real example. I'm not going to say who it was to, but I used this probably about a month ago, and I said something like this to someone who I care about in my life. I said, when I hear you give me your advice without me asking for it, right? That's the observation. I'm a little annoyed. I'm frustrated. Those are the feelings because I really want like consideration and understanding. And also for you to know that I got this, right? Would you be willing next time to ask me if I'm open to hearing your advice before giving it to me? So that's OFNR, right? In a sentence. And the person said, sure, honey. Yeah, I can do that, right? For the most part, it's working pretty well. Another example could be, let's say, when I saw your report card and that you had A's and B's, I felt really proud and excited because it met a need for, or because it met needs for accomplishment and growth and learning for you. Would you mind sharing how you feel about your grades and what's going on for you? So simple examples of what that actually looks and sounds like. It doesn't always have to be used for like, quote unquote, like negative situations or conflict, right? You can use it for positive things as well. All right, and so I mentioned that Miracle and I are gonna do a quick review of empathy through nonviolent communication, just to if you were on the last webinar, it's a review. If you weren't on the last webinar, definitely go back, and like Samantha said, if you have time to watch that, it'll be helpful as well. But we give empathy to someone else when we're giving empathy, and it really involves 3 components: presence, understanding or reflection, and feelings and needs guesses. And so, Miracle, I was going to ask you, like, how do you know when someone is present with you? What do you think?
So that's more of a nonviolent communication type of deal going on, and it could just be shaking their head up and down, or like yes or no, if they understand or not. Eye contact, making sure that you're looking the person in the eye, because you don't want to look everywhere else while someone's trying to communicate their feelings and needs. So you want to make that eye contact too.
Yeah, and I think you may have said nonviolent. I think you meant nonverbal, right?
Oh yeah, nonverbal communication. Sorry.
It's all good. Yeah, so that's one way you know you're present with someone, right? Is doing those sorts of things. But how many times have you been in a conversation to the audience and you're like doing those things, or like someone else, how about, let's say someone else is like nodding their head at you and they're like, yeah, I gotcha. And then the next thing that comes out of their mouth just shows that they were like fully not present with you, right? Yeah. And so that's where there's gaps in like communication, right? We think we understand what someone is saying, but we often listen to respond instead of really listening to understand. I love that quote. We often listen to respond instead of listening to understand. And so when we're fully present with someone, we're physically with them, we're like mentally, emotionally, right? And so it can be hard to do, but it's all about building this muscle of presence is what we call it. And so then taking that into step 2, we really show we're present by using understanding, which is essentially reflection, right? And so Miracle, did you want to say anything more about that one?
2 and 3 are kind of like one. So to get someone to know, like, okay, this person's listening to me, you can actually like restate or reflect back that statement. So for example, so just to get this correct, what I'm understanding or what I heard you say is you are feeling this way and you have a need for this kind of like, how would I say that, Janelle? Like,
yeah, that's right. Yeah, you're spot on, right? So I can do it here. I can model I can reflect what I just heard you say. So yeah, what I'm hearing you say in Miracle is like, it kind of ties 2 and 3 together by showing presence, right? So you're simply just summarizing back and saying what I heard you say, or what I think I heard you say. What I'm understanding is that you're frustrated because maybe it's about a need for, transparency or importance, or to know that you matter, right?
yes.
The third component is always about guessing. We're not telling the other person what they're feeling and needing. I think as a society, we often get stuck in this right, wrong, and we got to get it right. But that's not necessarily the case with NVC. We're working on trying to let go of that like paradigm and really just guessing what's going on for the other person using the feelings and the need sheet.
So kind of like, instead of like, oh, you're feeling like this, it's like without them telling you.
Like stating it as a question instead of a statement. And again, you're only going to use this process. You're only going to give empathy to someone if you want connection with them. What is extra hard, right, is when we're actually in that conflict with someone and responding with empathy instead of other conversational responses. I'm not going to get into a review of that today. That was on part 1 webinar. So go back and watch that if you want to, but that becomes a little bit challenging, right? It takes time. I've been practicing NVC, teaching NVC for about 10 years now. And it's still sometimes a challenge for me, right? Because we're rewiring how we've been raised to communicate with others. So it's challenging, but it's worth it, in my opinion. So let's break down now observations, feelings, needs, and requests here. So, and we're going to have some knowledge checks on the next 3 slides. So just make sure you're paying attention. They don't matter whether you like pass or fail, right? It's just a simple knowledge check. But when we talk a little bit more about observations and evaluations here, observations are essentially, I like to describe them as like what you see or observe, right? What you see or hear, what you remember, free of evaluations. So almost as a fly on the wall would see it, is what I like to say. Evaluations, on the other hand, are disguised judgments, right? So things like you always, you never, you're so disrespectful. Those are all evaluations. They contain blame and judgment in them. And it's really important to differentiate those two things, because if we want to have connection with someone, it's so important to start with just the facts, right? If we can start with just the facts, it's going to lead to a much greater outcome of being able to have some resolution and some flow in that conversation, versus if we were to say, you're so rude, or you're always this, you're never on time. And so we'll give some examples here in a minute. Okay, let's go ahead. So this is the knowledge check that I was talking about. So essentially, what we're going to do is I'll read through these three up on your screen here first, and then you'll have a poll that'll pop up, the knowledge check. We'll give you maybe about 30 seconds or a minute to answer them. All right. So the first one is, you always snooze your alarm and cause so much chaos in the morning. So you're determining whether each of these statements is an observation or an evaluation. Number two is, you're always speaking to me in that disrespectful tone of yours. And number three, today I saw you take the iPad from my room after I asked you last week to not touch my items without asking permission first. All right, so in a minute here, you'll see the poll come up, and then we'll go through them one by one. All right, so hopefully everyone could see your quiz results on your screen. And so we'll go through them one by one now. So the first one, you always snooze your alarm and cause so much chaos in the morning. A Miracle, do you want to explain why that one is an evaluation or a judgment?
So that one would be an evaluation. And that's because you're allowing the other person to argue back. You're leaving room for them to have that back and forth conversation.
Right. Like, so that could sound like, what are you talking about? I don't always snooze my alarm. It only happens like a couple times a week, and I don't cause chaos. You're the one causing chaos in the morning with how you try to like run this house, right? So like, there's so much room for arguing those pieces. So it's the always is that evaluation, and the chaos, right? That's a judgment. So how you might make that more observational is, let's say when you set your alarm for 6 a.m. and you didn't come out of your room until 6:30, 3 days this week, right? That's the observation. It's as a fly on the wall would see it. It's not that you're always snoozing your alarm, not that you're causing chaos. It's that when you set your alarm for 6 and you didn't come out of your room until 6:30, 3 days last week. Straight facts, right?
Straight back.
Straight facts. And then you'd move into, of course, the feelings, the needs, the requests there. And so that might sound like, I feel really overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed and anxious because I have a need for predictability and order and structure, right? And then you could move into a request after that. So we'll break down the rest of those here in a minute, but for now, we'll just focus on the observations.
I was going to say something like, no one can argue with facts, but people can argue with opinions.
Yeah, it leaves a lot more room for arguing. Now let's go on to number two. You are always speaking to me in that disrespectful tone of yours. Again, that's an evaluation and judgment, right? Disrespectful is another one of those words that we talked about in webinar 1 that can be seen as a thought feeling or a evaluation, a judgment. I feel disrespected is not actually a feeling. And sometimes people also use that as evaluations instead of observations. So for this one, it's considered a judgment because it also leaves quite a bit of room for the child to argue back with you. They might say something, you're always on my case about my tone. I have no idea what you're talking about, right? I don't talk to you in a disrespectful tone. So a way to make this more observational is something like, last night when we were talking and you told me to just shut up, right? So that's the adult telling the child that this is what happened last night. This is what you told me, not that you were rude, not that you were disrespectful, just the observation. And the third one there, sorry about that. Like I mentioned, that actually is an observation. So if you marked it as an observation, you are correct. And so this one is an observation, right? You can't argue with it. You asked them to not touch your items without asking permission first last week, and you saw them take the iPad from your room. An evaluation might sound like when you keep stealing my things, or when you know better, right? You should know better not to do that. So those are the evaluations there. But yes, number 3 is an observation. Okay, so feelings versus thought feelings. This is a review from part 1. There's a link here and in the chat as well as a handout for faux feelings, also called thought feelings, that are often disguised as feelings. I feel manipulated. I feel disrespected. I feel undervalued. I feel tried, right? Those are all thought feelings. If you have thoughts that you are being disrespected, you might be feeling what, a miracle? Can you guess some actual feeling words? If you have thoughts that you're disrespected, what might you actually be feeling?
I am feeling unappreciated. I don't have my needs and feelings, but
That's okay. That's actually that's a thought feeling too, unappreciated. So I might be feeling frustrated. I might be feeling annoyed. I might be feeling angry, right? If you have thoughts that someone is disrespecting you.
Is agitated one?
Yeah, that's considered a feeling, right? So being wary of those thought feelings and why this all matters is because if we use a thought feeling in a statement to someone, it's probably just going to add more fuel to the fire, right? It's gonna, like we said earlier, leave room for that person to argue back with you, versus just sticking with those true emotions, true feelings, and trying to leave the judgment and blame out of ourselves, or that blame of ourselves or blame of the other person. All right, so let's go ahead and do this knowledge check. So in a minute here, you'll see the poll again for these 5 statements, and you're essentially going to determine whether each one is either a feeling or a thought feeling. All right, so I'm frustrated, I feel disrespected, I feel hopeful, I feel like he's just an angry person, I feel unappreciated. I'll give you about a minute to do those. All right, so number 1, if you selected feeling, you are correct. I am frustrated. Doesn't necessarily have to use that feel word in there. You can say I am, right? It's a way to make this process, this communication process, sound a little bit more like natural, quote unquote, right? So that's a judgment there, natural, but just it's a way to make it sound, it flows a little bit better sometimes in conversation. Number 2, I feel disrespected. That's a common one that we often think is a feeling, but is actually a thought feeling, right? So we gave that example earlier. What might you actually be feeling if you have thoughts that you are being disrespected? And so we took some guesses there around maybe frustrated, agitated, a miracle guess, right? I feel hopeful. That's a feeling. I feel like he's just an angry person. I don't know if the answer came up for that one, but that's definitely a thought feeling. So with this one, anytime we often sometimes will say like, I feel like, or I feel that. And now that you have heard it, I want you to like pay attention to how many times people use this in like day-to-day life, right? And what follows is not actually a feeling, it's a thought. And again, in like day-to-day conversations, it's fine, right? But like what gets tricky is when we start using these things when we're in conflict with someone, or when we're wanting to express something to someone and we say, I feel like you just don't care about me. I feel like I'm the one who always has to do everything around here. I feel like he's just an angry person for this example. And it, again, leaves that room for the other person to argue back. And then I feel unappreciated. That's also a thought feeling there, right? It's a faux feeling. What might, a miracle, can I ask you, what might you be feeling if you have thoughts that you're unappreciated? What might be the actual feeling underneath that? Oh, looks like you might be a little frozen. Yeah, so I might be feeling maybe withdrawn if I have thoughts that I'm unappreciated. I might be feeling uncomfortable or uneasy, maybe a little discouraged or unhappy. And let's move on to needs versus strategies. All right, so this again is a review. I love this Marshall Rosenberg quote that says, all conflict is a tragic expression of unmet needs. All conflict is a tragic expression of unmet needs, meaning we haven't been taught or learned to speak from a needs lens. And so when we talk about needs, really we're referring to needs versus strategies. Needs are not tied to a particular outcome, right? Needs are not tied to a particular outcome. And so needs on this sheet, again, they're universal. We can all agree that these things, for the most part, are important in our lives, right? They're enriching our lives. Things like adventure, things like being heard, being seen, trust, support, kindness, right? And so strategies in conflict, we often get stuck arguing at the strategy level because it's tied to a particular outcome. I need you to do this, right? Versus I need cooperation, I need consideration. And the thing here is that there are many strategies to getting our needs met, but often we just get stuck in this one way of doing it, that it has to be this way. And the other person says it has to be this way, right? But what's really underneath that are needs for both people. And once we can identify those, then we can collectively work on a strategy to meet those needs. And so also, if this seems like kind of simple and like, duh, but if we express our needs, we're going to have a more likely chance of getting them met. So for this knowledge check, there's 5, right? And so they are, I need support, I want respect, I need you to be more kind, I need emotional safety, and I need you to clean up your dishes. All right, so let's go ahead and pop that up there, and we'll give you about a minute or so to work through those, identifying whether it's a need or a strategy. All right, so I need support is a need, right? You can't really argue with that need. It's not tied to a specific strategy. I want respect. Respect is also a need. Again, this is one of those ones where you can say want or need, just like on the last one where I said you could cut out that feeling word and just say like, I'm frustrated, I'm excited, I'm hopeful. I want respect is another way to make it sound a little bit more colloquial. I need you to be more kind. That's a strategy, right? It's tying it to a specific outcome to someone else. And sometimes when we use the word I need you, whenever it's followed with you after need, that's usually going to be a strategy. And it's not that strategies are bad or wrong. There is time to find the strategy. It's just first identifying what the need is there. I need emotional safety. That is definitely a need. And I need you to clean up your dishes. That's a strategy. The need underneath that might be for cooperation or order or predictability or support maybe, but really making sure we identify what that need is first. All right, great job everyone. And now we're going to move into requests, the 4th component of using expression, using observations, feelings, needs, and requests. The 4th component is the request piece. And so we differentiate here requests versus demands, meaning a request is not tied to an outcome, and we're also open to hearing a no to it. However, I will preface it that sometimes demands are necessary, right? Especially if we're a parent or we're a group home staff member or whatever it may be, where there's like a power imbalance or someone in a position of like authority, so to speak. We may sometimes need to make demands of our children or, of someone else. But it's really important, if it is a demand, to one, have awareness of that, right? That we are not open to hearing a no to this. But two, also, like, what is the need underneath that for you that's going to be met? When we can express the need behind our demand, or even better, our request, then the other person is more likely to want to contribute to that because they understand, right? It's a need for this. There's two types of requests. There's action requests and connecting requests, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. But also, when someone says no to something that we're asking them to do, it's really important to keep in mind that we're to not hear the no, but try to hear what the need is for them underneath that no, right? So if they say, no, I'm not going to do that, trying to remain curious about what's going on for them in that moment. And I get it, that's hard, right? That's so hard. But if we can shift our energy into thinking about that, it leaves us a little bit more open to trying to find a strategy then to meet that need versus like, this is the way it's going to be, and you have to do this or else, right? Because when we start using that sort of language, it doesn't lead to connection for the other person. All right, so when we talked about two types of requests, action requests versus connecting requests, we'll break down what connecting requests are here now. And so connecting requests are used in a couple different ways. First, I really like connecting requests because they can open up the conversation. So they can invite the conversation to happen. It may sound something like, hey, are you willing to talk about what happened yesterday? As soon as someone has choice and autonomy in having a conversation, they're more likely going to say yes. Some teachers that I do some work with in Florida, in Tallahassee, I meet with them virtually once a week. And one teacher was saying the other day that she was having a conversation with a student. And there's always, what I love about this process is there's always the chance for a do-over, is what we call it. And so she had a conversation with a student that didn't go the way she had hoped. She was not proud of herself and how she showed up. She said NVC skills went out the window, right? And she had awareness of that after the fact and wanted to have a do-over with that student, apologize for what she said to that student, and also express what was going on for her in that moment and her frustrations with the student's behavior in class. And so the next day she pulled the student aside after class and asked him, like, hey, are you willing to talk about, what happened yesterday in class between us? And he said no. And then a couple minutes later, she told me that he went up to her and said, well, am I in trouble? and she said, no, sweetie, like, I actually want to apologize to you for how I behaved yesterday, and also share like what was going on for me in that conversation. That's really what I wanted to talk with you about. Are you willing to do that? And he said, oh, okay, yeah, I'll do that. And so it's a really helpful way, instead of just like jumping in and launching into the conversation and using expression, right? It's a way to make sure that there's that connection and that flow. So I already talked about ensuring connection is still there a little bit, but another way is after you've said your observation, feeling, needs, then saying something like, could you let me know what you heard me say? Because I want to make sure I was really clear. Or how was that for you to hear? Could you let me know how you're feeling about that? What's going on for you? Do you have any thoughts about that? Those are all examples of connecting requests. It's also a way to make sure you're hearing the other person's perspective. Could you let me know what you heard me say? I want to hear what your thoughts are, right? And then making sure that your message was heard in the intended way. Because sometimes, even when we use observations free of judgment, feelings, not thought feelings or judgments, needs, like clear needs, not strategies, sometimes that message can still be heard by the other person as a blame or judgment. And so that's really important then for that other person. You could say, could you let me know what you heard me say? I want to make sure I was clear in what I just shared. Not tell me, reflect back what I said, right? There's a difference there. And so when you say that, and then the other person says back, well, you're just telling me that I'm super lazy and I don't care about anything. So why does it matter? Right. And that's a time where you would say, wow, I'm sorry that you heard that. Like, that's actually not what my intention was in what I just shared. I actually just wanted to say, like, observation, feeling, need. You say it again, and then you make sure that your message was heard in the intended way. So we have some examples here. What those actually look like, I already shared a couple, but do you have a couple minutes now to talk about what happened last night? Would you be willing to tell me how you're feeling right now after hearing what I've just said? Number 3, it could sound something like, can you share what was going on for you yesterday when you said that to me? Right? So all examples of connecting requests. And the last one there, I've said it a couple times. I want to make sure I was clear in what I just shared. Would you be willing to tell me what you just heard me say? So when we think about and talk about action requests, so we just talked about what connecting requests are. Action requests are, simply put, it's the action, right? It's what we're specifically asking the other person to do. It's concrete and specific. It's presently doable, and it's action-based. So sometimes I often like to also say, like, it's kind of like SMART goals. It's specific, it's measurable, it's attainable, it's relevant, and it's timely, I think is what the SMART stands for in SMART goals. So making sure that what we're actually requesting either of the other person or of ourselves when it comes to the action requests meet those criteria. And it's hard. This is hard, but it's really important, right? Because if we're not specific with what we want, we're not going to get it. If we say, I want us to spend more time together, right? I want affection. It's not clear on what that actually means or is. And so when we think about turning the below statements into action requests, this first one here, you need to show more respect for my belongings. I'm going to give the audience maybe about 20, 30 seconds to just think silently about how you might make that more of an action request, something that is specific, concrete, doable, and action-based. So just think about that here for a minute. And so one of the ways to make that more of an action request could be, I'd like you to ask me first before borrowing my clothes. Right? So that's a specific example there. But that's an example of how you might turn, you need to show more respect for my belongings. I'd like you to ask me first before borrowing my clothes. All right. So the second one, I'd like you to help cook dinner more often, right? More often is where it's not super concrete and specific. It's not presently doable, right? It's like, when is that going to happen? How often? Those are the sorts of things that can lead to lack of, or can lead to confusion around making it a specific action request. So an example for this one that I came up with is, I'd like you to help cook dinner with me on Monday and Friday nights. And then actually coming up with like what it means to help cook dinner. Is that chopping the vegetable? Is that cooking the pasta? Is that whatever it may be? And making that more of a conversation with the other person. Yep, can we identify a few days when we each can prepare dinner this week? Perfect, love that. And that last one, you need to be nicer, or you need to be more nice to me as your foster parent, right? That's not very specific. What does nicer actually mean? So here's one that I came up with. It's a little long, so bear with me. Next time you notice you're starting to get frustrated about something I asked you to do, could you please not tell me to F off? And instead, can you express what's going on for you? And if we're both open, like actually talking about it, right? So that's a clear concrete, specific, presently doable, because it's saying that when you notice you're starting to get frustrated about something I ask you to do. All right, so hopefully that's clear, right? And it is like, oh, okay, that's easy to do, but it takes time to train our brains to like think about things and communicating in this way. So this is kind of tying it all together. Again, I know I gave an example earlier in the webinar about 2 examples of using OFNR, the one with the advice that I was sharing, that situation of like unsolicited advice, and then also the one about the grades. So really, when we want to use expression and action, we talked about this in the last webinar. We call it jackling. It's when we blame ourselves or blame the other person, versus giraffe language, which is identifying, either if you're giraffing in, you're identifying your own feelings and needs. If your giraffe ears are facing outward, you're identifying and trying to guess what's going on for the other person in terms of feelings and needs. But in terms of expression, jackling is okay, right? I put this line on this image here because we're jackling with awareness, and we're making sure that we're not doing it to the other person that we're in the situation or want to express the message to. It may sound something like, he's always on my case about that, and he's never on time, and why is he always like trying to pass off work onto me? Very aware that those are all judgments, those are all evaluations. I love my jackal, right? I love to jackal, but I jackal with awareness. 1, and 2, I don't jackal to the other person. Step 2, and it's optional, right? You may not need to jackal and blame, that's okay. Step 2 is, what are the observations here? What are my feelings? What are the needs that are arising for me, right? That's that blue card. And then the green is the request. What's a request I might make of myself, I might make of the other person, or of others around them, right? Again, remembering it's really helpful to start off the conversation with using a connecting request to ask that person if they're open to having that conversation in that moment. Here's an example. What we were going to do is, Miracle was going to talk about how she wants more attention from her boyfriend. All right. And so she was going to, I'll just pretend to be a Miracle here. All right. We're just going with the flow. So step 1, yeah, if you don't even care about me, like right? I'm jackling with awareness, not to him. He never gives me any attention. He's always on his phone playing his stupid video games, and he doesn't even care about me. Like, what the heck, right? Okay, so that's step 1, jackal. I know I'm jackling. I know those are all judgments. What is my step 2? What are the observations? Well, the observations are that, oh, hi, Miracle.
I'm back. I'm so sorry about that.
Okay. I was starting to pretend to be your boyfriend for this example.
Oh no, I'm back.
Okay.
I'm so sorry.
So it's okay. You have grace here. It's all right. So I was just explaining that you were jackling and saying that, he never cares about me. He's always on his phone, blah, blah, blah. And so what are the actual observations, though, for that situation? Are you ready to share those?
Yes. So, and that's my feeling and needs, correct?
Well, the observation first. So what do you actually observe him doing that makes you
Oh yeah.
that doesn't care about you?
Most of our quality times, he's on the phone 7 to 8 hours out of the day.
Yeah. So he's on his phone playing video games, right? 7 to 8 hours a day. It's an observation, right? It's not that you're always on your phone. If you're always on your phone, that means you're literally on it, right? 24/7. That's probably not happening. It's about 7 to 8 hours, like you said.
Yeah.
And in terms of your feelings, what comes up for you in that?
Unhappy, frustrated.
Yeah, those are true feelings, right? Not you feel unappreciated, you feel unseen, right? Those are thought feelings.
I am I'm
Yeah.
unhappy when he does that, and then I am frustrated
Mhm.
when he does
Because
that.
because you have a need for what?
Affection, communication, and just connection.
Yeah. And maybe to matter too.
Yeah.
Yeah, to know that you matter, right? That's a
Exactly.
need. And then in terms of an action request here, what might be a request that you make of him?
I could say like, "Hey babe, if you're okay with it, I would like to go on walks and spend more quality time together, and we could do one day out of the week we can go on walks together."
Perfect, right? That's specific, that's actionable. It's probably doable, right? It's not like I want to go on a walk every night for 4 hours and you have to talk to me the whole time, right? That may not be. So tying that all together, when I see you on your phone playing video games like 7 to 8 hours a day or so, I'm unhappy. I'm a little frustrated because I really want connection with you. I want communication. And I also kind of want to know that I matter, right? And so I'm wondering if you'd be willing to go on a walk together one day a week without our phones, right? And just talk.
Just let it be.
How it
Yeah.
all sounds all together. It can flow a little bit better than it can sometimes sound like a little choppy, but once you put it all together, it flows pretty well. All right.
Practice makes perfect, so
What was that, a miracle?
oh, no, I just said practice makes perfect. Mm.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, exactly. I wanted to pop up a couple reflection questions before sharing resources and links on the last slide. And so, in thinking about everything that we just went over, right? The observations versus evaluations, feelings versus thought feelings, needs versus strategies, and requests versus demands. Remembering there's two types of requests, connecting requests and action requests. In thinking about all of that, remembering about the jackal piece, remembering part one was about empathy, making sure we're present fully with that other person, reflecting, summarizing what we're hearing them say, and guessing their feelings and needs rather than using other conversational responses. So clearly there's a lot to this communication process, and it does take time to learn and implement and kind of like live in integrity with. I'm speaking for myself. Like I said, I've been practicing this language for about 10 years now, and I still sometimes have hard times, right? So in thinking about all of that, what seems like it might be easy to start implementing in practice and what might be a little bit more difficult. And if you attended webinar one, if you want to think about webinar one as well, and in the last, 2.5 months since that one, what has come up? What have you thought about? And then number two, how might you use some of the information or skills learned today in practice going forward? So the questions are a little bit tied together. So we'll give you about 5 minutes here to just kind of have some silent reflection time and think about those sorts of questions. And then we will share resources as well. Yeah, so just in thinking about those questions, right, and what seems like it might be easy to start implementing in practice, what might be a little bit more difficult. I'm curious to see what y'all came up with. I already try and do this, but what a good reminder that when emotions are high, intelligence is low. The takeaway for me is to remember to calm/cool down before responding. Yep. And we talked about this on webinar one, part one, which was the WAIT acronym. Why am I talking, or what am I thinking? Because anything I say right now may not be connecting for the other person. So whoever answered that is spot on with that calm/cool down period. Another person said the thought feeling statements will be more difficult. Observe/describe is good. The observation option of communication will be easier to practice with the youths that I work with. Learning more about NVC motivates me to analyze my own language when I'm talking to staff. I I've turned some of the lists of feeling words into posters to use with our staff because changing is hard. Awesome, I love that. Using observations instead of judgments is a place to start. Going beyond feelings and emotional reactions will be more difficult. It will be hard not to pass judgment naturally. Once we know things about certain individuals, it will be hard to put biases to the side. Yeah, good point. That is difficult. It will be easy to start implementing how I decipher between feelings and thought feelings and separating that. And it'll be more difficult not to make or pass judgments about others' behaviors, that everyone has a voice, being mindful and aware of what language I currently use and making adjustments based on self-reflection and assessment. Love that. Stating observations and feelings, implementing clear requests for connection and or action, and implementing specific requests to have needs met seems less challenging. Expressing feelings instead of thought feelings is going to be more challenging. Yes, I agree. How might you use some of the information or skills learned today in practice going forward? Being more specific and descriptive when describing feelings, being more patient, hang the posters I created from the shared and previous lists of feeling words so others can begin to consider language used, encourage peers to attend training. I love that. Yeah, these webinars will be available to watch after, and there's also learning tracks that Samantha mentioned in the beginning. I'll mention those again here at the end, but definitely a great reminder to use the OFNR tactic. I need to practice these skills to strengthen existing relationships. It's also easier to start practicing some of these things with like lower level situations and like mild conflicts rather than like a full-blown thing that's on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being something really minor, 10 being something huge for you. Like trying to practice using OFNR on like a something around like a 2 or a 3 or maybe a 4 and maybe not a 10 to start off with. I will use the information learned when I am processing an incident with my teen and preteen population to address incidents. I will use this during conflict resolution. This is vital and will actually make a solution be the outcome instead of just arguing with someone to get my point across. Yeah, good point. Could be useful anytime there is a conflict or misunderstanding with other people. Asking someone in my life for connection paired with clear action. With a very difficult client who tries to provoke negative responses using techniques to get past the accusations. Yeah, being curious, remaining curious about what's going on for them. Conflict resolution and in work communications. And I hope to teach my clients new ways to better communicate. Awesome. Thanks everyone for sharing that. I really appreciate all your responses. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again to just close us out. Miracle, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
Um, I was just kind of smiling because because I'm trying to start it too, because I think I told Janelle that I'm horrible at it.
Is that a judgment of yourself?
Yeah, see? I'm like it's just so natural. And I try to joke about it like with things that aren't so serious. I think you have to find how it will work best for you mentally. Cause me, I'll just do something goofy. I don't know, like, hey, you ate the rest of my macaroni. I don't know, like just something like that, or then something serious. And then when someone were like, when your emotions are so high, I don't know, for me personally, like I'm so stubborn that I don't want to use nonviolent communication in that moment because my emotions are like stubborn. No, no, I'm not finna. No, I'm like me. I'm like violent communication, but it should be nonviolent communication.
Yeah. So what I'm
It'll
saying is like in the moment, your emotions are high and it's like what you know about NVC goes out the window, right? And that's completely normal, especially for trauma survivors, right? Because your brain, your lid flips, your brain goes offline. And what takes over is that amygdala, that fight, flight, freeze response. And so that's what I really like about this is there's that chance to cool down, to wait, to process, what am I needing? Emergency empathy right now. I really love it when I have consideration. I really love it when I have respect. instead of getting lost in our judgments and our evaluations. I call it the judgment spiral, right? I've seen it happen. Like I see it happen so frequently with people where it's just that spiral out of stuck in those judgments instead of getting really clear on observation, feelings, needs, requests.
And I feel like men love men, but I feel like men, they're harder to do nonviolent communication with because they don't express their feelings
Mhm.
as much.
Yeah, it can be harder with gendered roles and things like that, for sure. Yeah. But the more the more we express, it just kind of becomes more natural, right? Uh,
Yeah.
and 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 other people will just start getting used to like hearing those sorts of things and how we communicate.
Yeah, and I think I told you now, I was like, I'll go to my boyfriend and be like, like, what's wrong? Or like trying to start that communication, and then it's just, I'm fine. And how
Right.
do you pull that nonviolent communication back in? But
Mhm. Yeah.
nonverbal, am I saying it right? Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. So Samantha's posting a couple links here for additional training and learning opportunities. I owe a lot of my credit and learnings around nonviolent communication to Dr. Bigby. I 10 years ago learned this communication process through a diversion program that's housed in Tallahassee at a teen center that worked with juveniles who had been arrested, or just through the education system where were referred to the program. For every teen who was in the program, there was also an adult volunteer. We met every Tuesday and Thursday evening and learned this communication process, learned about these skills, and actually were practicing it, doing role plays, doing dyads with the teens. And that's really where I learned about this work back in 2014. Cindy was the director of that program at Palmer Monroe Teen Center. It still exists. It's run by someone else now, who's also an amazing woman, Julia Denholm de Maria. But Dr. Bigby started actually her own business that teaches nonviolent communication to people all over the world. And so if you're interested in learning more, she also just wrote a book. That's her book right here, My Link to Mildred, Interrupting the Epidemic of Trauma via NVC. I've been telling people I do not enjoy reading. Like, reading is a strategy for some people to get their needs met for like adventure and fun and relaxation, right? But for me, I do not like reading. And so when I got this book, I was like, all right, I'm gonna attempt to read it. I read this book in about 3 days. Like, it was a page turner for me. So highly recommend that. It's available on Amazon. There's also a podcast that she has that is, I love the podcast episodes are like 10 to 15 minutes. There's about 150, I think, episodes now. Really interesting podcast available on for free on Spotify, Amazon Music, I think, all the podcast apps. And then, of course, Dr. Marshall Rosenberg's book. He created this language, this communication process in the 60s. He passed away about 6 years ago, but this book is sold millions of copies, really helpful, that breaks down what NVC is about. We really appreciate your time, and thank you again.